Hi, everybody. This is Marcus Fairs, broadcasting live from the Dezeen studio in London. I'm bringing you today the fourth and final in our Miami Design Talks series, hosted on Dezeen to coincide with the Design Miami Fair, which opened in Miami this weekend. Today, we're going to be talking about the influence of Miami on Latin American architecture and design, and vice versa, the influence of Latin American architecture and design on the city of Miami. This is brought to you together with Uribe Schwarzkopf, which is a leading developer in Quito, in Ecuador. And we have the general manager of Uribe Schwarzkopf, Joseph Schwarzkopf, with us today, speaking live from Quito. Hi there, Joseph.
Hi, Marcus.
How are you doing?
Very excited to be here.
And you've just been in Miami, I understand. You got back home into Quito, what, last night? Was it late?
I got back home last night, yes. Beautiful weather in Miami.
And you're based in Quito, but what is your connection with Miami? Do you have projects going on there? Are you involved in things in the city?
No, just it's very close by Quito, so it's a 3.5-hour flight. So a lot of people from here in generally South America, go to Miami for vacations, inspiration, business, anything. I just go for pleasure and inspiration.
People often talk about Miami as being the capital of Latin America, or Miami likes to put itself forward as the capital of Latin America. Do you agree with that sentiment? Does Miami hold a special place for people from the southern parts of the Americas?
Yes, yeah, I think we all get a lot of inspiration in Miami. We get a taste of what the U.S. is. And also, I think Miami gets a lot of inspiration from Latin America. It's been a mix. And you can see a vibrant city with a lot of context, a lot of culture growing up. It's a city that's changing and transforming all the time. So I think the influence is both ways.
Thank you very much, and we'll come back to you in just a few minutes where you'll give us a little presentation of the work you've been doing lately. Let's go now to Mexico City to say hello to Tatiana Bilbao. Hi, Tatiana.
Hi, Marcus. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you this morning.
So briefly tell us a little bit about yourself, Tatiana. Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm an architect. I'm based in Mexico City. We've been working I always like to say, in many stages of human life. So from a botanical garden to a funeral home and many things that happen in between. But I think basically, and very focused on the concept of living spaces, on domestic spaces. Yeah, that's what I do.
And what's your relationship with the United States, and particularly with Miami? Do you get to go there much? What does the city mean to you?
Well, in reality, I have not that strong relationship to Miami, but yes, to the United States. And as you know, Mexico, the relationship between Mexico and the U.S. is quite a relationship, let's say. And I think it has become very symbiotic. And I think it's truly important, the understanding of the culture and of the situation that it's emerging from this symbiosis that is happening. And therefore, I have dedicated also part of my life to, first of all, understand the United States, and second of all, try to bring something of what I have there. I teach since 10 years ago, I think, in the United States. We have several projects there. And I think there is a real importance on the understanding of both places and what is happening with this mix, in order to, kind of advance, especially in political discourse, because that hasn't been very clear and very easy, especially the last 4 years.
Yeah, tell me about it. Well, we're hoping to turn over a new leaf very soon. But you say you teach, but do you teach in America? Whereabouts do you teach?
I teach at Yale mostly, but I taught at the GSD in Harvard and at GSAP, Columbia, Rice. So I'm currently teaching at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee because I won Marcus Prize. And And yeah, so I truly believe that through teaching, I'm able to really get immersed myself in understanding a little bit of the culture in truth, because I think that in Mexico, both in Mexico and the US, we have this kind of idealized idea of what the other is. And I think that I believe that we need to really get immersed into each of us countries to understand it correctly. And this is basically what I teach, why I teach, and also what I teach. I always create studios that are challenging the situation of the present situation in my country, in order to have these connection and relationship with the people in the US.
Okay, great. So we'll see in a few minutes what you've been up to lately when you do your presentation. But finally, our third panelist today is Carlos Zapata. Hi there, Carlos.
Hi, Marcus. How are you? Very nice to be here with you.
Nice to meet you. And you were born in Venezuela and spent some time in Quito, but now you're based in New York, right?
Correct. I spent some very nice years, my formative years in Quito, Ecuador. When I was 16, I moved to the States and I stayed here since then.
So out of the three Latinos we're speaking to here, you're the one that's jumped the Trump's wall and living in America. How's that for you? Why did you decide to move to America?
First to study. I mean, I came to study in New York, architecture, and then I stayed for opportunities and never went back. But I did go back to visit. I still have family in Ecuador, in Quito, so I have been going back and forth for a while.
And what about Miami? Do you have a close relationship with the city of Miami? Have you built there? Do you go there often?
Yeah, very close. I actually lived in Miami for 4 years in one of my moves throughout the States, because I've lived in several cities, but mostly New York. And I have built quite a bit, from supermarkets, expansion to the airport, condominiums, hotels. So yes, I love Miami. It's a very interesting place to build.
And what's your take on the special connection that Miami has with Latin America?
Well, I think Joseph is correct. I mean, there is a very, very strong connection. Maybe not so much with Mexico. I think Mexico tends to go more towards California. That would be my take. But the rest of Latin America, from Colombia down to Brazil, Argentina, including Ecuador, it does tend to come to Miami and call it its capital. It's economic, actually, and cultural. And as Joseph mentioned, there is a back and forth. It's not just one way. And it's not just design, it's food and everything else, food, music, etc.
And what about Latin America? Do you get back to the southern part of the Americas often? What's your relationship with South America, as we call it over here?
Mostly Ecuador for family, also Argentina for family, but Colombia a little bit. So I do have a few countries that I do visit, but mostly my relationship has been with Ecuador, mostly Quito, because I grew up there. My parents made their life there. None of us were born in there, but we adopted it as our country, perhaps.
Great. Well, each of you is now going to give a short presentation, starting with you, Joseph. So let's go back to you. And if you could share your screen with us, Joseph, and talk us through a little bit about what Uribe Schwarzkopf are doing.
Yes, thanks, Marcus. Well, to introduce myself formally, my name is Joseph Schwarzkopf of Uribe Schwarzkopf here in Quito, Ecuador. I'm very excited to participate in this year's Design Miami. We've always been actively engaged in Design Miami and Art Basel, sort of a way. It's a great source of inspiration and an amazing chance to see the top designs around the world. Remember, we don't have too much events going on here in South America, so we tend to go to the US and Europe to get ideas, to get informed, and to get inspirations. The context of Miami is also incredible and inspiring. The architecture of the city has so much to offer nowadays. As an architectural developer here in Latin America, Miami is a major source of design and inspiration for innovation and ideas. The city is known as a gateway to Latin America, with the largest migration of Latin Americans in the second half of the 20th century. This has influenced this city, lifestyle, and design, much in the way that Latin America is influencing by Miami. We feel such a connection to the city of Miami. It had such a vibrant, dynamic culture, and it really acts as a gateway to so many other areas of the world for us in Latin America. We're developers here in Ecuador, and our commitment and inspiration is to develop projects that promote healthy urbanism. In the city of Quito, most of them. We build communities, we provide hubs for cultural innovation here in Quito, and promote sustainable development. We have collaborated with international talent and designers, including Jean Nouvel, Moshe Safdie, Marcel Wonders, Jarky Ingalls, Philip Stark, Bernardo Fort Brescia, who is from, well, he's from Peru, but his company is based in Miami. And of course, with Carlos Zapata, and now we're working, very excited to be working with Tatiana also in a new project here in Quito. We build mostly residential communities, buildings in urban centers and office towers. But our mission is to create sustainable urbanism in the city. Collaborating with architects, it's also good for us to improve our skyline, the infrastructure, the buildings, and also get new ideas for public spaces here in Quito. We take inspirations and talent from around the world to our city and integrate this with our local traditions and customs. The city Quito is under transformation. It's the city that's that grows the most in Ecuador. It's the capital of Ecuador, and talent is starting to stay. Businesses are growing, and a new local culture is developing with so many untold stories. And really, Quito has become a destination by its own, I think, nowadays. To give you a little bit of sense of Quito, Quito is known more for the Old City, which is an UNESCO World Heritage Site, and an incredible example of colonial architecture. However, the city has really grown to be a center for exciting modern and contemporary architecture. Many of our projects are around La Carolina Park, which is sort of the way, it's not the best example, I think, in scale, but you can compare it to Central Park or other cities that have big central parks in the business districts and in residential districts. It's a massive green space located in the urban center on the north center of Quito. All the restaurants, nightlife, and contemporary culture surrounds the park. So here we're going to show you some projects that we're building. This picture that you see there is from a project that we did with Carlos, actually. We just delivered 1 month ago. It's called Unique. It's a beautiful building. It has 3 stories of amenities in the middle of the building. And the picture you see there, it's a endless swimming pool with the view of all the park in the city. So it's a very nice amenity. We like to work with architects who have created remarkable projects, especially in Miami, like Carlos Zapata, who is here with us today, or Arquitectónica, who we've worked in 4 buildings now in Quito. Bernardo Fort Brescia has really set the stage for postmodern design in Miami, and we found that his style complements the city of Quito quite well. In addition, he understands designing for our climate and creating incredible indoor and outdoor spaces. We often, in all our projects, offer big spaces for communal activities, which have the benefit of air and sun and landscaping. We've been designing this way for a while that prioritizes Quito's climate and provides a natural flow to outdoor spaces. What's important about Quito is that we have, let's say, an eternal spring climate. It's a little bit cold at night, but it's always very comfortable weather during the day. As we are in the center of the world, we don't have any seasons, so we have the same climate year long. Very sunny, very blue skies. So I think it inspires a lot of architects and designers for the views. And also we're surrounded with the Andes Mountains. So I think the views you can get 360 degrees from all the buildings that you set up in the city. So that's an advantage. Let's move on. All right. This project here is a project that we just designed with Jarky Ingalls. The project's name Epic. It's designed in big New York studio. It's right in the Carolina Park. In addition to integrated green spaces to open air spaces to take advantage of Quito's climate, our design our design here is inspired by natural landscape, is the landscape that surrounds them. So what we try to do here is also put the park inside the building in these open spaces that they start in the public access, and then through the building they keep growing. So it's a massive tower of more than 350 units, but it has a lot of open spaces and a lot of green all through the 24 floors of the tower. So it's a very special project, I think, for us. I love the architecture of this building, and it's also inspired of our traditions and cultures, because the colors, the rose colors that we use here, are an echo of the center of the city and the roofs of the center of Quito. So I think it's going to be a really nice addition to the skyline of the city. Then another building around the Carolina is a building that we're doing with Moshe Savdi. It's called Corner. Corner responds to the park by merging the environment with a lush facade of greenery, creating a natural synergy with the park below and surrounding mountains. In addition to integrating greenery into the building, which is beneficial to the environment, this 24-story tower also features top-of-the-line eco-efficiency. So by promoting this healthy urbanism that we're trying to do here in Quito, we're building all our projects with all top-of-the-line eco-efficient systems. So there's a lot of water. The water systems are very efficient. We're also very efficient on energy use. So we're trying to do these communities and projects as responsible as we can get now. And I think they respond top of the line now of systems that you get around the world. This rendering that you see here, it's a project that we're building with Jean Nouvel. It's called Aquarela. It's located on the valley of Cumbaya. Actually, that's where I live too. As you can tell, it's designed not to only respond with the environment, but to integrate into the natural landscape of the city. The shape of the project is like mountains. The topography of Quito and Cumbaya is also seeing a lot of greenery in the balconies and integrates a lot with the scenery. So I think this is a very special project, very unique in its way, because it's all full of green and stones. And actually now that we're delivering the first stage, you can see that adapts a lot to the skyline of the valley, and it looks like a mountain itself. So it's very nice to have a project that it's also dense, that you can integrate and looks like all the scenery of the city. So that's a special project. Also a new building that we just did with a Miami architect. It's called Yucubaya, which is a collaboration between U and Arquitectonica. It's designed inside by Philip Stark, and the architecture was done by Bernardo Fort Brescia. Actually, we worked in Miami, this project, the whole time, since the beginning till the end. And it was a great inspiration to see the Arquitectonica projects all through the Sunny Isles and Brickell, because we tried to do a mix. And what we did here is it has a lot of Miami look, but we also integrated some signs from the indigenous people here in Ecuador to the facade of the building. So it's a modern building, but it has some signs and signatures of indigenous communities here that makes the building also different, you know. So it's not repetitive with the condos on the beach. So I think it's a very beautiful project. We also have, if you see next to the pool, something that Philip Stark designed, that it's a pattern of a skirt of indigenous woman here. And we designed this style especially for all the communal spaces. So that's the idea, to bring talent from international architects, but also mix them with our culture here, so we can have something unique done in our space. Also in this valley of Cumbaya, that's where we're gonna build a new project, which is named Botánico, with Tatiana Bilbao studio, which is designing. And it's also a great surprise for the city. It's a beautiful building. It's a big, dense building, but also that adapts a lot to the scenery and the skyline of the city. Then Quito has become a great city. It's an easy city to navigate. It's forward looking. It's transforming a lot. Here it's a special rendering that we have of the skyline in 2022, actually, of these buildings that we're doing. On the left far building that you see, it's 32 stories, it's going to be the tallest building in the city. And it's a building designed by Jark Ingels, and integrates also the park to its terraces. It has a system of ventilated terraces that have a tree up to the 32nd floor inside the terrace, which was really a tough thing to build, but I think it's a great addition, and it's a beautiful thing to have the park integrate inside the building, and it's going to be really a masterpiece in the park. So if you can see what Quito was before in this picture here, I think with all this inspiration that we've got through the years, especially in Miami, I can say, because we've been traveling to Miami a long time. As Carlos said before, for me, and I work with my father, who is an architect. I'm a very, let's say, architect and design enthusiast, architect design wannabe, let's say. I don't have the title, but I love architecture. We've always been traveling to Miami and other cities also, but getting inspiration and knowing these great talents that I have the pleasure of joining this panel here, but also I've had the great experience of working with them, bringing them to our country and trying to change the skyline, the architecture. And we're trying to make Quito also, and I think it's going to be in the next 2 years, a hub for architecture in South America. I don't know if there is a city, except for maybe Sao Paulo or Rio, that has so many architects with tremendous talents from all over the world doing buildings. In one city, a small as Quito, that has a little bit more than 3 million population. But I think it's going to have this great addition of buildings that are going to change the city, the modern skyline forever. So I invite all you guys to come visit Quito. I think Quito is a destination of its own. We've been working a lot on promoting the city and the culture and the food and everything. It's transforming really, and it's a beautiful place. So you're all welcome. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. We have more info online. You can check all the projects, uribeschwarzkopf.com, but there's a lot to see in our city. So thanks a lot for the time.
Thank you very much. Well, you're really talking up Quito there. You're almost making it sound like a rival to Miami as the Quito will be the capital of Latin America before too long. But
so people from Miami to Ecuadorians have been going to Miami and buying property there and spending vacations a long time. Also Mexicans, Venezuelans, Colombians. We hope we can bring people back here too, and share what we have to share. That's our idea.
Well, it's only right that the capital of Latin America should be in Latin America. So I think you've made a very good case for Quito there. But you were talking about the climate in Quito and the topography. We can see the landscape of the city is quite different from Miami. As a developer, what lessons can you take from Miami, though? What's good about the way that architecture has developed in Miami? And also maybe what's bad, because Miami is not perfect.
Well, in my opinion, Miami has a very diverse architecture scheme. Once you begin with the Art Deco buildings in South Beach and Ocean Drive and in Miami Beach, and then the transformation that downtown had, and afterwards all the buildings in the beach that are made by really the best talents in the world, you see that all the buildings have a different look, different facades, different amenities, different feel. The look and feel and insides also are very, very different. So I think there's a whole mix of architecture and design in Miami. There's not one pattern that repeats itself. Obviously, you have condos on the beach that have kind of the same patterns, but the newest buildings that I've seen by great architects that are working there are very, very different. And that's the source of inspiration that we want, because we go there, we see ideas, we get inspired also to do those kind of things here in our city. The climate, In sort of a way, it's similar. Miami, it's hotter. It's a beach climate. Here we are 3,000 meters above sea level, so we're in a valley in the mountains. Gets a little bit cold at night, but the climate, it's here you don't need a air conditioner or heating in any building because it's a, let's say, a perfect spring weather all year long, but it's also very sunny and gets hot. So in sort of a way, it has kind of the same aspects of the climate in Miami. We don't get winters, and also the views that in Miami you have that advantage. The views you get in any building that you go, you get views in Miami, to the bay, to the beach, to the city, to the skyline of downtown. So here in Quito, it's kind of similar. You get a lot of views even to the mountains, to the park, to the city. So in those sort of ways, we have the same. In Miami, I can't say really a bad thing that comes to my mind now. I just think the city is transforming a lot. We're going to see in the next 10 years a different Miami that we've seen now, also in population and migration to Miami now after COVID is also growing a lot. People want to go to a place with a lot of area and all the advantages of the beach and the weather. So let's see what happens. But I think Miami has a lot to grow, a lot to share, and the next 10 years are going to be interesting to see what goes on in Miami, design and architecture wise.
And you mentioned Arquitectonica. I mean, they've been doing interesting work in Miami for a long time. I remember when I was a student seeing pictures of developments they'd done in downtown Miami, I think it was. So they were kind of ahead of the game, really.
Yeah, actually, they did I think it's a beautiful building. It's called Atlantis, I think, in downtown Miami. It was one of the first buildings in Brickell. Until now, I think it's a masterpiece in downtown. And I think
is that the one with the palm tree in the middle of the the window cut out of the middle with the trees in it? Yeah.
And they have I think they've been one of the major sources of change in modern architecture in Miami. Bernardo, who's the main architect there, is from Peru. So it's good about this talk that we're having, that he brought a little bit of influence of Latin flavors, Latin culture, I think, to Miami, and has done a lot of nice changes there, and a lot of very interesting buildings. So we started working actually with him 7-8 years ago, when we've done 4 projects. Very interesting company. They're very Miami focused, but they have this Latin touch that they put in the buildings. It's been very nice, I think.
And you meant a final question before we go to Tatiana. You talked about a Miami look. What is the Miami look? And is there a Quito look? And if so, what is that?
Yeah, well, the Miami look, I don't think it's the exact word, but that's what came to my mind, let's say. It's white buildings with glass terraces, very big windows, and not too much movement in the facades. But that's changing a lot, I think, in the newer buildings. But if you go through Collins Avenue and you see a lot of buildings, the majority of buildings are kind of set up that way. There's a lot of exceptions also. And the Quito look is, we have a lot of Colombian talent that came here a long time ago. So the influence of Colombian architecture was very big here. And I don't know if you've been to Colombia, Bogota or Medellin or Cali, everything is brick buildings. And Quito was like that before, actually. Uribe Schwarzkopf has 47 years here in building, and the majority of buildings we did before starting to get new ideas and working with international talents was brick. You know, we only use bricks on facades. So if you come, you do an aerial shot of Quito, everything is brick building. So I think the mixture now with these modern facades is giving it an interesting story to tell here.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Okay, Tatiana, let's go to you in Mexico City. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me, Tatiana?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I was just waiting for you to come up on the screen. Great. Okay, so if you want to share your screen and talk us through your work.
Yeah, so as I said before, I think that I don't have that close of a relationship as Joseph to Miami, but I think that there is really quite an importance of this idea, what I was saying, of this symbiotic relationship, and Miami is one of the most interesting expressions of that. And I also think that for me, one of the most inspiring buildings that I ever that I always refer to is this building in Miami by Herzog and Demeron, which is 111 Lincoln Road. And I think that the importance for me relies exactly on that, on that tension between the relationship that, for example, a program that is very needed in the city, in this case, a parking lot, does to a neighborhood. And this is a parking lot, and it's doing a lot, and it has done a lot to Lincoln Road as an expression of a program that normally is hidden, but is so present in cities. And I think that for me, the importance of challenging those things are really where we are as practice focusing in design. And we are really, for us, it's not about cars. For us, it's about people. And for us, it's less about the context where the buildings are and more about the social precepts that really are what we engage with and when we design. And I think that one of the when I was asked to do this talk, I was thinking what should I present? And I really truly think that in these types of cities, Miami or Mexico City or Quito or Venezuela or New York, where you are, or London, maybe, it's really kind of the importance of the relationship between us humans. And I think that we have been alienating in cities very much that possibility of creating compounds and spaces for cities to have common places to interact, to react, to have conflicts. And we have trying to do that in our buildings, no, in order to kind of erase this dichotomy between public and private space. And we have been working on the idea of integrating social spaces within our buildings that really can transgress this possibility within our built environment. And this is a building we're designing in Monterrey, which is the second largest city in Mexico. And Monterrey is a very industrial city with a more extreme weather than what we have. But one of the things is that Monterrey has really, since it's been developing quite rapidly, has even more even faster than in Mexico City, kind of individualize the life of people and create these very alienated places for living, or codos maybe. And what we are doing in this building is trying to really bring the idea of community back by introducing small spaces that will create these types of relationships. So it's a 164 apartment building, but we have broken it into parts in order to create this idea of having 4 apartments that relate to a garden, 6 apartments that relate to a roof terrace, 20 apartments that relate through a big amenity that it's going in different floors, through different stairs that connect them, or more apartments that then relate in a pool. And in order to create like kind of this stage idea of relationship. And in a way, we have been really trying to bring this possibility into many ways of creating relationships in buildings, that for us the important relates exactly on that, no, on the possibility of integrating this idea of living towards the city and not kind of hiding it and recluding it into 4 walls, which for me it's what the building in Miami of Herzog and Demeron does. No, they are not hiding the necessity of having cars in the middle of the city in the most important shopping street of Miami, but they are exposing it. And really, I think that the possibility of really integrating all the things that we do in a city into the view of the city, it's where our interest relates. And we have been working in many cities in Latin America, but also in North America, as well as in the United States. And one of the other projects is this in Guatemala City, and where we are really trying to think that we could build the vertical environment in a more organic way. And I think that there is an importance of challenging the vertical realm, because for me, we have been criticizing as society the suburbs and what the suburbs do to people and to the city. But I think that we haven't focused clearly enough in towers, and towers are little suburbs in the middle of cities. So we are really trying to challenge that typology to bring more organicity. And this case is obvious that, as you see in the image, is not different programs, but those programs really are designed by someone else. So the idea is to bring more diverse possibility to the vertical realm, to not only have kind of a fixed form and not allowing the diversity of the city to grow up. And we have been really doing that in different exercises. I mean, this is a building that hasn't started construction, but is almost ready to do that. But we have been challenging also academically and also in terms of its physical expression in different possibilities. This is an exhibition in the Chicago Biennial, but also we have done several iterations of this possibility, which is we design only a structure, and then we call in for different people that are interested in building in our building, and they build different things, with really trying to bring the possibility of the organicity of the city and how the city has been built through the years to bring it to the vertical realm. No? And in Cumbaya, in Ecuador, in the project that we're doing with Joseph, what for us is this kind of place that can not only kind of blend this diverse environment that Quito is built upon, but also can accept it, no, and not blend it. Allow these kind of differences to be visible, but in a way kind of with a fixed frame. So it is a very big compound, as Joseph was saying, but for us the important relays on exactly those points where we are trying to bring that possibility of relationships within the neighbors, but also that those spaces are really kind of those points of the acceptance of diversity of this environment. And I think that then the next stage of the importance is the relationship and the acceptance of this in the public space. And we have been working for 15 years in this botanical garden in Culiacan in Mexico. It's another city in the northwest of Mexico City. And this place is incredibly diverse because obviously it's built by the social tissue that Culiacan has, because it's a public botanical garden. And I think that what we mostly basically learn is that really cities need to create these environments where the expression probably is not perfect, it's not homogeneous. And this is what we encounter because this garden was built before we arrived. And but to understand how to then interact with those places, for example, for us as architects, and not to impose an architecture. So we have done, because we've been working for 15 years and it's a work in progress still, very interventions that are very punctual and that probably are not very grand, like big movements or very shiny, but they're very important for the garden. For example, this pond, or that has not only enhanced the ecological system there with the collection of the bamboos, but also has really introduced a space and a spot for the possibility of another social encounter, or this introduction of small benches around so people can really have a possibility of a retreat, or the introduction of hammocks, really very, very little moves, or only by delimiting the place where people and plants interact, or really by accepting the possibility of different works of art that this garden has in very different expressions. And we have been using kind of the possibility of the space, which I think this is something that also is very interesting in the parking lot. You know, the possibility of the space, that of the temperature, of what Joseph was saying. I mean, we have very specific conditions in all these different cities that the buildings need to acquire, no, I need to understand. And then therefore the expression at the end will be completely different, whether it's in Miami or it's in Quito or it's in Mexico City. And I think that for us, this was the importance here, no? So the client wanted to asked us for a room for projections, and we say, a room in a botanical garden, let's do an open space for this possibility to happen, because you are in a botanical garden, no? And an architecture that is always reminding you that you are there, and the possibility of the architecture of becoming this platform for social interaction, but also of the expression of the space, of the place, and in a way of the acquiring, you know, that sense of the environment that happens in this place. And because of this work, we were hired in a city nearby, which is in the same state, called Mazatlan, and to design first a park. This is still the botanical garden. And I just wanted to go through these images and be more specific about what was I saying about the importance of the understanding of the social context of the people that live there, of the way they use the space, of the way they place themselves there, and exposing it to the architecture becomes these frames of exposing. And because we did this work, as I was saying, we were hired to do the consolidation of a central park, which is a huge central park in Mazatlan, and it's in the middle of the city. And it was kind of a remnant space because it has a regulating lagoon. And so all these years, Mazatlan has grown and has kind of imposed this super great pressure to this natural place where the water flows up and down. And we were called to design it and to really give an important place towards the city, because it is very important. It's in the center of the city. But not only that, it's because also to the possibility to protect this very important space, ecological speaking, for the city, because it creates this regulator possibility for the hydraulic system of the city, that keeps the city safe in most of the important cases of hurricanes or tornadoes, or these not tornadoes, they're not tornadoes, hurricanes or tropical storms. And so what we did is we worked with this lagoon that comes up and down, and we had created like this possibility of the usage of the lagoon, of the park, within the different times of the year that the lagoon comes up and down. So there are spaces where the lagoon is dominating the place. There's places where there is kind of this relationship that at some point of the year you can use it, some point of the year you need to use other parts or that are because they're flooded, and there are other spaces in the garden that can be used year round just the same way. And we knew in the beginning that there was going to come a museum and an aquarium. And in the beginning, we were just designing these and knowing that these programs would come. They were designed by different architects, but at some point the client decided that they didn't like the aquarium because it didn't look like an aquarium. And they asked us to design an aquarium that looks like an aquarium. And first of all, well, when we were already consolidating the park, the lagoon, and doing the intervention, they asked us then to design this aquarium. First of all, I had a real problem of thinking on an aquarium because I think that aquariums are those programs that are really man controller of the universe program, and because it's the life we cannot see, then why don't we bring it back to us? So the good thing is that the client was really open to understand, to really change the possibility of this place, and not only being an aquarium that brings penguins to a city where they cannot live, but really being able to create a door to what they have here, the most interesting natural aquarium, which is the Sea of Cortez. And so we said, okay, so we need to understand how to create this possibility that the nature world give us to understand its relationship with human and social life. So in a way, we decided that we were going to intervene in this existing building that it was built in 2020, but in 2100 it was flooded. And in 2300, we arrived to open paths for people to discover what was the life that arose there, what was the life that really was able to exist. And this is how we designed the building. The building was designed 3 years ago, and now it's under construction. And our idea is to create this possibility of us humans to understand that not only nature is really dominating our world, but that we are part of nature. So our idea with this building that was once flooded is that really nature took over, and that we humans were able then to open paths to discover this place that was taken over by nature. And this building is currently being built. It's going to be finished, I would say, the end of next year. And I think that with this, I can finish my presentation. And thank you for inviting me here with you.
Thanks, Tatiana. If you could unshare your screen.
Sure.
So that last project you're showing, of course, there's a big synergy with Miami there, because Miami is a city of waterways as well, and of wildlife. You have pelicans and you have manatees floating around almost in the city itself. How important is the integration of nature into the city? Do you think there seems to be a theme that architects are talking about increasingly now, of bringing nature into the city, and not like a controlled nature, but a bit of more of a wild nature? Is that happening?
I would say the other way around. I would say that we need to think that we are nature, as I said. How can we really understand the importance of the relationship to that, and not bringing nature to the city? Like the city is built on top of nature. How can we create a more kind of present relationship with nature?
And you talked about the social context before, and I liked the sentence you said about towers are little suburbs in cities. But when you're designing for Quito or Mexico City or for somewhere in the States, how much influence does the social context and the way people in different parts of the world use buildings influence the outcome? Could you just design the same housing thing for Quito as in Miami, as in LA, or do you have to take into account the way that people use buildings, and what would the difference be?
I think it's absolutely important that we understand that we cannot homogenize how people live in different cities, no? And I think it's not only because of the physical conditions, which is quite obvious. I mean, it's not the same as doing a building in Miami as in Quito, because the weather is completely different. But it's not only that it's really about what is the history of the place, how is the people interacting with that history, with that context, with that nature that allows people, not only allows, it builds people self to really be different and to live differently. So I think that there is an urgent need of the understanding that we cannot translate how a building is done in different contexts and do it exactly the same in the context that you're trying to work with, but really relying on the local possibilities, maybe learning from other places. This is very important and necessary, and by learning from what happens in other places, understanding better what can happen in this space. No?
And speaking here as a European, this talk has been framed as the city of Miami and its relationship with Latin America. But of course, Latin America is not a homogenous thing. It's huge for one thing, and you have all different types of cultures and all different types of landscapes. As someone from Mexico, to what extent do you recognize with the whole idea of Latin America, or is it really so diverse that you can't think about it as being a coherent part of the world or a coherent bunch of cultures?
For me, it's both. I cannot say either one or the other. For me, at some point and individually, I believe that we're completely different, but I can really identify myself with a lot of things. First of all, I think that one of the reasons that we can have our understanding of a more homogeneous place is because we were conquered by one reign, which was Spain and Portugal, and that had kind of spread the language and culture. But if you see the expression of how that culture that was imposed in this land was able to interact with the local specific culture, is really completely different, and that is very interesting. No, that is when the difference, you can understand how the differences are done and where are the different cultures that rely on. So there is a common thing, which is that we were colonized by the same empire, but then there is kind of the incredibly rich different expressions that happen through the territory because of the very important differences that were in specific each place.
Great, thank you very much, Tatiana. And I'd like to, after Carlos's talk, I'd like to bring us all back together to talk about Latin American culture and where it's going and what the hotspots are. But Carlos, it's your turn now. So if you could share your screen with us. In fact, Carlos, if you just say something so we can see you on the screen.
Yes, it's wonderful to hear Tatiana and Joseph, actually, to see how diverse ideas and diverse points of view really form, the architecture. From Joseph's point of view as a developer, how he's accepting different designers, perhaps, to come into one particular city where they are, one of the largest developers, and they're using that diversity to try to enrich perhaps the city. Now, I think that's something that happens in Miami, and I think maybe, Joseph, that there is a little bit of inspiration from the phenomenon of Miami becoming an international design center by bringing ideas from different countries. Maybe that's what Joseph and Tommy are doing in Quito as well. So I think one is feeding the other. I think that's to go back to Miami in some ways. Now, to go to my work and to explain a little bit what our interest is, because I think that studios reflect the interest of the people that work in it. So in my case, my studio is very much interested in a variety of projects, not in a linear study of a particular type of project, but we like to jump from one to the other. That we've been very fortunate throughout our career to explore different types of architecture, whether it's commercial architecture or very, very particular one-family homes or hotels, which I like very much. But I like the fact that one day we're working on a stadium, which is what I'm showing you here. This is it's a very large structure. It's a couple million square feet, housing 65,000 people, during a few times a year. But it's placed in a very beautiful site next to Lake Michigan in Chicago. And the challenge here, of course, was to make something worthy of the city, not just another stadium that sits on a parking lot surrounded by parking, but to explore how to manage the surroundings of the stadium and make them more in kind with the city. So we had to, within the same budgets as anybody else, we had to bury parking, create gardens, break the bowl of the stadium to allow for views in and out of this magnificent site. So we basically had to find a way to make this type of architecture, which is usually very common and very equal around the entire field. We needed to make it very asymmetrical and very uneven so that it responded to the different parts of the city, the views, the water, etc. So this is the type of thing that we like. We're brought in because we have a completely different point of view. Parts of what you see in this slide here is the fact that besides being a stadium, it's also a cultural place. It's a memorial for Soldier Field, which is a designated historic site, and we had to do a state-of-the-art stadium within that. Then I bring you to a completely different part of the world, which is Vietnam, and a completely different type of architecture. This is a high-rise office building. It's the first Class A office building in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City. It used to be Saigon, next to the Saigon River. And one of the features of this is that our client wanted to have a helipad in the building. To him, it signified, the fact that you can have, an international building. So, but usually helipads go on top of the building. You never see them. You just see the little bird coming up to the building and disappearing. But we wanted to celebrate this and make it into a design feature. So we placed the helipad next to the top of the building. Of course, we studied all the wind patterns and velocities, etc. And we had to do it, correctly so that it's safe and approved. But also gave us the opportunity to start expressing the structural aspect of our designs. If you start looking at what we do, is actually trying to free that box, which a building usually is trying to contain it and make it very specific and very repetitive. Yes, we do that because it's needed, but there are parts of our buildings which start to flow in and out, almost to free themselves from the rigidity of the structure, which I think it speaks about the interest of my studio. So it's not just doing it the most efficient way, the most practical way, the most economical way. Yes, you have to do that, but to me that's the beginning. Then we have to take it a step further and see how we can explore another part of the design where it starts to become lighter. I think that's a word where we want to go, where the structure starts to become lighter and it starts to lose that rigidity that doesn't allow for your mind to see movement in it. So in this case, the platform, the helipad, became basically a piece of the building that peels off, almost like a petal. It just peels off and stays there suspended by the air. And then I'll show you another slide where in different part of Vietnam, this is in Hanoi. In a convention center campus, national convention center campus. We had to get permission from the Prime Minister to build this building because of its location. It's a 5-star hotel, JW Marriott, 450 rooms. And we placed this on the edge of a lagoon and wanted to create a very public site, but also a semi-public site with the arrival on a second floor, etc., etc. But the important thing here is also the movement of the building, which speaks of a little bit of freedom, especially where it's placed, which was very government controlled, perhaps, because it's a gated campus. It's the National Convention Center campus. This is where all the dignitaries from the world come to meet together when they're talking about Asia Pacific, politics, etc. So we wanted to bring a building that started to be more relaxed, to start to have movement, to start to be not completely understood at once. So you see how the different parts of the building start to take on different directions. And I think that was a symbolic response to the presence of that heavy, perhaps, government control on the site. The next slide actually will show you back to Miami. I'm trying to bring you some of the pieces that we do in Miami, so it has a lot of relevance to the chat, to this talk. But these buildings on the right are on the boards. We hope to get the permissions to start construction after the pandemic, hopefully, because the pandemic has put a huge stop on many things that were on the boards. In this case, you have a building on the edge of the Miami River. If the Miami River, to me, is one of the most important parts of Miami. It's very raw. As you said, manatees are floating around, or they're floating here among the ships that are moving cargo, stolen goods from Miami that go to Haiti. It's a fantastic combination of life, perhaps. But what we wanted to express with this building here is that movement, that horizontal movement of everything, the water, the boats, life, basically, because everything is moving in one direction, up and down. And we wanted to actually portray that and transfer it to the building. So the building has a fluid horizontality to it. In one of the comments that Tatiana mentioned about this garage by Herzog and the Muron is interesting because yes, it's a quite significant building on Lincoln Road, which we actually did the initial planning for, and we were very happy to see that building come up. But since then, even though Tatiana appreciates it, I appreciate it, you appreciate it, I'm sure, and most people do, the city has imposed a lot of restrictions to hide the cars. So we have a garage here that grows out of the building, as you can see, but our idea was also to integrate it with nature, but leave some openness to it for air and light to go through it. And it was an interesting thing to get this through the approvals, because since the Herzog and the Muron garage, 111 Lincoln, the city changed their code to not allow that to happen again, which is unthinkable. It's one of the most progressive buildings perhaps in Miami, and the city itself, changes their rules to not allow it to happen again. So it's an interesting dynamic. So maybe there is also something not so positive about Miami, Joseph, as you were saying. There are some things about every city, every country that need to be also looked at and interpreted in different ways to be able to produce the architecture that goes into it. So we had to reinterpret all those obstacles and try to work around them in order to portray a sense of openness and lightness to the structure, even though there were a lot of obstacles to prevent us to do it. But again, what I like about the site is the fluidity of the movement along the linearity of the river. The next is actually a house. You see, we changed scales very drastically from a stadium, from a high-rise to a house. The house came first. This is in Quito. So this was the first structure that my office did in Quito. I think this is how we connected with Uribe Schwarzkopf. I think I heard Tommy Joseph saying that he was once in this house. He was invited to the house and he started to wonder who did the house, and somehow connected my name with my family's name, who had an art gallery in Quito for many years, and connected the two together and realized that I was actually from Quito, and we started talking about doing something together. But this house to me is important. It was an expressive house, very free on the edge of a terrain that goes down. But instead of cantilevering it against the terrain, the clients actually, when we walked the land for the first time, they said, we've talked to a lot of people, but we don't want to go against the terrain. We want to feel that we're levitating on it. So together we decided to place the house embracing the terrain around it without cutting it. And I think that's what became the shape of the house, and also the distribution of the spaces, and the elegance as how the extremes of the house is actually projected delicately around the edges of that terrain change. Now, this house inspired a building, this building in Singapore, which one of my clients, when we were presenting our work, looked at the house and said, can we turn this into a high-rise? And at the beginning, I was wondering, what do you mean? But then I understood that he was asking for a series of very distinctive homes to be stacked up together and made into a building. So he was talking about a series of penthouses basically being stacked up vertically, which we did. And each of the penthouses had a pool. And those pools are these arms that start to come out of the building. The next slide, you'll see more of a zoom. And each of these penthouses, which are located at different parts of the building, not necessarily on the top, because I don't think the value is necessarily trying to be on the top all the time, but having a diverse relationship to the city and to the surroundings. Some people value being on the lower part of a building more than being on the top, for instance. So what we did is to take these versions of that house with its own pool and its own projections and stack them into the core of the building. The next one actually brings you back. I'm sorry. This one actually talks about the delicacy of the facades. We were able to layer these facades in a way that it becomes almost like a skin, like a veil. And what that does is that these movable horizontal screens allow the unit owner to have privacy, because this is among other buildings. So at some point you can actually screen your neighbor but still having the same amount of light going through, and then you can open terraces, you can close terraces. It's a very dynamic, moving facade actually, which we were able to do here. The next one brings you back to Miami, and this is what I was talking about in Sunny Isles. There is a collection of buildings, I think about 7 to 10 buildings with different international architects doing their own version, I guess, is what it has become in some ways. So you have somebody doing a particular interpretation of condominiums for a particular developer and so on and so forth. In our case, we were hired to do this 54-story building and create this very luxurious condominiums on a very beautiful site. The ocean in Miami is really quite wonderful. And these apartments go from the ocean to the bay, so you have views of both. So once you're up there, it's really quite an interesting feeling. So what we felt is that there was a way to give a building something more than just the views, though. I mean, all of the buildings will have the same views. They're on the same beach. So we said, well, maybe there is something you can do so that when you are part of this building, you have a magnificent opportunity or magnificent set of uses that are not in any other building. So we took all these amenities which most buildings have, and we piled them all into one block, 3-story block, and put it in the middle of the building with 2 pools, one looking into the ocean cantilever of the building and the other one looking into the bay. And we had restaurants, we have open space, we have the gym, spa, etc., all grouped together so that it gives the building the identity. So it's also recognizable as a distinctive building, and also gives those who are lucky enough, I suppose, to have an apartment there, to also have a very social building, perhaps embedded in the middle of its high-rise. It's an area which is 3 stories at the height of most penthouses in Miami, which is 30 stories. And that belongs to you as well. So it was a way of giving a character to a building which otherwise would be repetitive, just floor after floor after floor after floor. And we wanted to bring some of the feeling of the building in Singapore. So we're learning here from Ecuador to Singapore back to Miami. And then from Miami, you'll see that we go back to Ecuador with the building that we're doing with Joseph. In the next slide, you see that there is that interest also in some ways to have a space, a common space in the middle. This is unique. This is the building we're doing with Uribe Schwarzkopf. It just opened. The one space I like the most here is that middle space because it's completely open. It's actually the elevator core, the columns, and the pool, and you can walk all around it. You can feel the air, you can feel the mountains, the clouds, everything. And also it responds to the city because instead of being very, very repetitive and straight, because that's a typology of Miami, believe it or not, this building starts to move a little bit more. It starts to curve as it goes up and responds to the movement of the mountains and the topography of Quito, which you notice is quite strong. When you're in Quito, you really feel it. You feel the presence of the Andes, and you feel the presence of of the movement of the clouds. So we wanted to bring that into the building, and that's a space where you can spend a lot of time, whether you're on the pool or not. You can sense the city from that space. We of course have rooftop, because the rooftops in Ecuador actually are becoming extremely popular, and they're very, very healthy. But we wanted to have a space which is also protected, so you feel the protection of the building even though you're on the outside. And so I wanted to keep my presentation short to give you some room to ask me questions or ask us questions and see if we can contribute.
Thanks, Carlos. So you were talking about Singapore, learning from Vietnam, learning from Quito, learning from Miami. But when you're building in Miami, since this talk is about Miami as the springboard for this talk, what do you have to bear in mind in the city of Miami? What's different? How would a project come out different in Miami compared to the other cities you're working in? Maybe stylistically, or driven by the climate, or by the way that people use buildings in the city?
Yes, the climate is very important, because it allows you to be outdoors, and you want to be outdoors. Yes, part of the year in the summer is a little bit heavy because the humidity is pretty hard to take, but most of the year you want to be outside in Miami. So that's why in that building in Miami, we created that outdoor space. We felt it was necessary, because I don't like these hermetic buildings where there is no relationship between the inside and the outside. You're always in air conditioning. You're always, enclosed by glass. So that's why we introduced that 3-story structure. I call it a structure. It's really a 3-story structure which opens up, and you are on the outdoors, go inside and outside. Inside of it, actually, there is an atrium. So it's a 3-story atrium which lets all the air go in and out into that structure. Very important to me that it responds to the weather. You don't want to do that in London necessarily, or in New York, but you can do it in Miami because of its weather. So that was a direct response to it. In Ecuador, we're actually responding with an open space, because it also can take it. The weather in Quito is beautiful, actually. You have, I think Joseph called it spring all year round. Yes, it gets a little bit cold at night, but it's a beautiful outdoor weather that you want to be outside, you want to use it, you want to contemplate from an outdoor space. So I think these are necessary interventions in buildings which need to happen more often, which is to create, voids into the buildings. Very difficult for developers to accept, and that's why I think building in Quito is becoming more interesting, because Joseph and Tommy understand this. But in Miami, the pressure to use every single square foot is really intense. So same in New York. It's just, zoning gives you this much, you gotta use everything. That's the difference. So in Quito, there is an opportunity, I think, because of the way that zoning doesn't control you completely. You can actually have more construction as long as the sellable space is met or not bypassed, but you can have more construction to actually support the living spaces. So that gives you more opportunities. So that's why you see all this movement, terracing, gardening into the buildings. It's possible to do it in Quito.
It's interesting how many times parking garages have come up in this talk. I mean, of course, 111 Lincoln, the Herzog and de Meuron car park is probably the most spectacular place to park your car anywhere in the world. But also OMA have done an interesting parking garage on South Beach. And I don't know, maybe I've got this wrong, but Miami, again, to a European, is a city that doesn't have much public transport infrastructure. It's if you don't have a car, you're kind of stuck, or if you don't have an Uber account, you're kind of stuck. How do you tackle the automobile thing when you're designing in Miami? Is there always a requirement that you put lots of parking there, and how do you handle that? And is that different from other parts of the world, other cities?
It's a requirement, a very heavy requirement, and it's changing as we speak. When we were developing the building on the river, the river edge, there is starting to be some reaction to public transportation, which is growing in Miami. And now they have commuter trains to go to the north, and they're actually emphasizing the small metro. And also Uber and Lyft, they have helped because the regulators are understanding that you don't need as much parking, especially for certain programs like hotels, etc. So we were able to, based on the location of this building, which is within a certain distance of a stop, we were able to reduce the parking considerably. Still too much. So in talking to the director of planning in Miami, when we were planning this building, we said, look, we don't expect to need that much parking. So we're designing this with the view of the future that at some point we're going to take over the garage plates and we're going to put programming to that. And he was very happy to hear that because he believes in that. However, the law doesn't allow it right now. So we have to wait for this evolution of thinking to become real. They all know it. Everybody knows that we're going in that direction, that we don't need as much parking. We don't need to go there. Things are changing. There is no need for the public infrastructure anymore. There is public transportation from other platforms like Uber and Lyft, which are actually and electric bikes and electric bicycles that are coming. And people are using them and they're happy to use them. So that takes down the need for all of these, infrastructure, expensive infrastructure, and expensive in terms of space, because it really dominates the space. Yes, one thing is 111 Lincoln, but there are a lot of ugly parking lots, dotting the city. And at that point, when you see a building and you're approaching a base of 10 stories of parking before you see a living person on a balcony, that's harsh to take. So that in my mind is a negative aspect of Miami. All the parking, of course, because of the water table comes to the surface. So you're facing all these ugly parking structures and then buildings on top of it. I think that needs to change. And it's changing slowly, but too slow. And I think that it's important to bring people down to the ground, not to have cars on the ground. And it's important to also have voice into the building, so it's not these monoliths which are completely alienating you from the natural aspects of the city.
And as we saw when we were talking to Craig Robbins from the Design District in Miami, there's a very interesting parking garage in the Design District. We've gone over time quite a lot, so we don't have much time left for discussion at the end, but I just want to ask one question to all of you. Since we're talking about Latin America, tell me your predictions. What's interesting about what's going on in Latin America? Is it architecture? Is it food? Is it design? What are the interesting cultural phenomenon we can look forward to coming out of South America? Joseph, I guess you're going to say Quito again, but what specifically do you think is interesting about your part of the world right now from a cultural point of view?
Yeah, well, if I can answer that, is like all of the above, I think in food, design, culture, I think Latin America is starting to explode. There are places like Mexico City, maybe Bogota and Buenos Aires that have done more than other smaller parts, but every country is different, has something different to offer in architecture, in design, and food, music. It's a very interesting place. I think Latin America has a very big future. A lot of expats are starting to come here, a lot of immigrants, a lot of people, immigrants in a good way, sorry if it sounds bad, but people are starting to come and live in South America. You have a lot of space. It's a great place to live. Climate is very good in the majority of places. So it's a great place to retire. And we're seeing Europeans, Americans that are starting to feel that way and starting to come here. Also in the future, we have a lot of water. We produce a lot of the food that we consume. We don't import too much of the basics that we need to live. So I'm talking in general, not only Ecuador, but all of the countries kind of share the same things. And I think the future is just starting for Latin America. And I think we're going to see growing populations in all the major cities and also the smaller cities that have something to offer. And we're starting to see that here in Ecuador, being a small country in Latin America. But Colombia, I've seen it, Mexico has seen it, but I think it's just starting. So I think it's a great future for Latin America.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. Tatiana?
Well, I believe that Latin America has an incredible, rich history that that dates back to 4,000 years. So I think that it's emerging because we finally, through several, we could even say centuries of instability, we have had a longer period of stability, of economical stability. So I think that this is, as a region, I think that countries were varying in stability in different periods. But right now, I think that the region has enjoyed this political and economical stability, which is, I think it's held with with a very fragile line. But anyway, and I think that this was able to then create this platform for all these culture to really emerge and be present in different expressions. So I think that what you were saying, food and art and architecture and music and dance and theater, it's really booming. Because it has always been supported by an incredibly rich history, and it has always been very rich. But right now, with the economical stability and political stability, then it's able to be even more widely produced and expressed. So I think that that is the reason why right now you're listening a lot of Latin America. But I think that the history, the richness of the culture comes from a very long time.
Great, thank you. And finally, you, Carlos. Same question.
I agree with both of them, but I think also tourism, meaning the ability to explore nature, because a lot of nature in South America is untouched. Not all of it is like in Europe. Every single inch has been, accounted for, and it's organized and it's given a use, and special agriculture and other uses. In Latin America, no. In Latin America, you still have vast areas of untouched territories. The issue or the problem has been the stability, as Tatiana says, not only economical but political, and that brings security. Without the security, traveling into these areas is just not being something you do. But the traveler, has grown more used to taking not risks, but a little bit of uncomfort to be able to describe how getting to these areas is. It's not always getting into a luxury car and arriving, but it's actually exploring and walking and taking a car through a road which is not paved and it's dusty, but then when you arrive, it's just beautiful. And that's the type of thing you discover in Latin America. Same in Asia. Asia and Latin America have that in common. But it's important that the stability continues. If we have political and economic stability, these places will become available to the tourists. And at that point, I think Latin America becomes stronger because it's another resource. And that's what I'm looking forward to, because I think it's precious what we have in there. So food, dance, culture, and also tourism, I think it's going to be pretty much in the next decades for Latin America.
Great. And on that note, we'd have to, sorry, was somebody saying something? On that note, we'll have to end the talk. It's been great talking to you all. Thank you so much, Joseph, Tatiana, and Carlos. And yeah, power to South America, to Latin America. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.